Let me thank all three of our witnesses. This has been, I think, a very healthy debate, or discussion, I should say. I want to start with the point that Ms. Bennett mentioned. She gave us those numbers, which were pretty strong about the audience that our media outlets under the broadcasting have versus Russia and China. But I just happen to be concerned that if you look a decade from now, whether those numbers will hold. I see Russia and China just putting so much resources into our hemisphere. Every time we travel, we see it. So we know that they are physically present and using propaganda and disinformation in our hemisphere, in Africa. And it gets back to the question I raised a little bit earlier, and Senator Booker raised earlier. We have Voice of America, I understand that. But we have the specific entities that are with Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. We have Radio Free Asia. We have our office in Cuba. We have our Middle East focus. We don't have in our hemisphere or in Africa. Should we be having a similar type of priority organization in those two regions of the world that might answer some of your questions about having local figures on our news media, because you're there in a more permanent presence and you establish those types of relationships. And to your point, General, yes, we have an advantage, but we don't always playing on a level playing field. We know that China, for example, on their contracts with the media companies, exclude access to our products. So being personally present, having a more personal involvement in the region seems to me might be a worthy investment. Ms. Brandt?
Thank you. Yes, as I mentioned, I do think that there's considerable wisdom in considering the feasibility of opening a regional bureau in Latin America. I mean, I think presence on the ground is essential to building out a network of stringer reporters, again, trusted relationships with local civil society members, activists, journalists, rights defenders in the community. So I think, building out a presence on the ground, I think, is something we ought to consider.
Mr. Walker?
So one point I'd make at the outset is that the Chinese authorities, the Chinese party state, they put a wide range of resources in, some of which may seem nominally autonomous, but in the end they're working in coordination with the paramount political authorities in the country. It's a very different model. We're still grappling with the asymmetries where we can put additional resources into one of these regions, which I think is a wise idea, but that would be one piece of a puzzle, in my view, that would equip us to deal, for example, with information and broadcasting, but China is doing a wide range of activities in people-to-people exchanges, building relationships, putting people on the payroll who work in media, and doing that for the long haul. And as you suggest, we should be in this for the long haul and think about ways in which we invest that are consistent with democratic values, but can compete in a meaningful way with this formidable challenger we have.
Mr. Stilwell?
Senator, it's a great question. We have a lot of resources. They're just not coordinated. My time at State Department, I reached over to 4 or 5 different agencies that were working on getting our message out in the region and then to the PRC in visible and not visible ways. But they are scattered because after 1991 or 99, when U.S. Information Agency was disbanded, we all kind of beat swords into plowshares. And to stand up another agency is going to take a lot of time and negotiation. I'm not saying we wait till that. A mediocre plan executed with violence today beats a perfect plan tomorrow. So let's get to the 80% solution or the 50% solution, but let's start to coordinate. And I'd start with defense and state, getting them to coordinate more directly.
Which is the point I was raising a little bit earlier about this organizational structure. And look, Congress has tried to struggle with this we've changed it twice in recent years. But we should be nimble enough to adjust to current priorities. And I don't really see that. I don't see us adjusting, taking resources from one part of the world to another part of the world because we see a national security interest in getting information out, accurate information out, because of the activities of our adversaries. And I just haven't seen that nimbleness. And part of it might be our responsibility in Congress, the way that we appropriate and the way that we've set up the structure. We know that we can't always put a lot more resources into a program. So if the resources are not being adequately used or not being coordinated well, it's compromising our ability to accomplish the mission. So it's something we need to take a look at. Senator